Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Ajay, for that really comprehensive view on how PAFI has grown over the years. So welcome again to the 11th Annual Forum. And like Ajay has already talked about, it's going to be an interesting 1.5 days of many sessions talking about what should be the policies, partnerships, and the priorities to be able to achieve this goal of $7 trillion by 2030 for India. And what better way than to start with a session on Niti Aayog to set the context and the stage. So thank you so much, Mr. B.V.R. Subramaniam, for joining us here today. And it's about how can we look at these transformative reforms, innovative policies, and can we harness the power to gain from the confluence of social, economic, and political pieces coming together for India. So a lot of us believe this is the time for India to really go forward and shine and achieve the goal of the vision of Viksit Bharat. And some of the questions that we will be looking to answer in this session today is, what are the key areas of reforms? How can the different stakeholders, including the private sector, many of who are represented here today, and Mr. Subramaniam, you'll be glad to know we have 800 delegates registered for this conference today. So we're looking forward to talking and discussing some of these points. And so just a little bit on yourself, Mr. Subramaniam. So 37 years of being in the Indian Administrative Service, has taken key administrative and policy-making roles in Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Jammu and Kashmir, and therefore has navigated some of the most complex political and developmental issues in the country. And now having spent about 1.5 years as the CEO of Niti Aayog, so looking forward to hearing more from you on how we can make this vision come alive. I'm going to do a quick introduction of the other gentlemen on the stage also. So we have Harish Krishnan, who is going to be moderating this session. Harish is, as many of you know, past president and a co-founder of PAFI. He is today the Managing Director and Chief Policy Officer for Cisco India and SAARC. Ajay, everybody knows. And then we have Chetan Krishnaswamy from Amazon, so who's also our Vice President for PAFI and colleague in putting together all these sessions today. And then, of course, we'll have the vote of thanks by Vish, who's a Director General and past President and founding member for PAFI and co-founder and partner of We Communicate. So over to you, Harish.
Thank you, Deepshika. Let me add my words of welcome to all of you to the PAFI Annual Forum 2024. A very special welcome to you, sir, for joining us today. I'll not make the mistake of saying that Mr. Subramaniam needs no introduction and go on to make a long introduction. All I would like to say is Mr. Subramaniam is one of the most respected government leaders of our times, and that's why he's always held very crucial portfolios, whether it is the Commerce Ministry or being Chief Secretary of J&K, or serving 2 prime ministers, including the current prime minister. So under your leadership, Niti Aayog today is playing the role of National Institute of Transforming India, very clearly. India today is a confident nation, whether it is the field of economy, foreign relations, or for that matter, sports and culture. You often said Viksit Bharat is not a dream, but a possibility. And we in PAFI are committed to work with you to make it a reality. We are opening our annual forum with the topic India 2030, Shaping India's Economic Future. Who better than Mr. Subramaniam as our first speaker? The aim of doubling economy by 2030 is the first step in the goal to become a $30 trillion economy by the year 2047. It is not enough that India grows, but we need to grow inclusively. Therefore, we also have the goal of per capita income of $18,000 per person. So we keenly look forward to your thoughts on the path to our goal of 2030. What are the key reforms India will need to do to take the vision reality? The format we have is for Mr. Subramaniam to speak for about 15-20 minutes. He has kindly agreed to stay on till 10:40, followed by a Q&A session. So please keep your questions ready. And now, please join me in welcoming Mr. Subramaniam.
Thank you, Mr. Khanna, dignitaries on the dais, members in the audience. First of all, I'm thankful to PAFI for inviting me for this session to launch a 1.5-day colloquium we'll be gathering and discuss. First of all, I compliment PAFI for actually having set this process in motion. I believe this is the 11th edition, and it began as a small gathering of people a decade or so ago, and then gradually mutated into something largish. I think it's very useful, because I think the role which you play is very critical. Growth is going to be driven by the private sector. It's undeniable. We think government is very big and government has a major role. It's actually, I tell you, the biggest private sector in India is agriculture. That's it. The couple of crores of people who live in agriculture are private sector individuals taking commercial decisions every season when they plant a crop. So actually, this has always been a private sector-led economy. May not have been 30 years ago in some sectors or whatever, but I think that is there. And the role which people in public affairs play in acting as a bridge between the private sector and government is very, very crucial, very useful. And you play the role of carrying the views of the government to the corporate world and carrying the views of the corporate world into the government. That helps a lot, because policy making is an iterative process. It doesn't happen in a one-way linear fashion. So the iterative process has to be actually facilitated, and I think you play a wonderful role. Coming back to the topic, I think I just would like all of you to close your eyes for a second and think, what would India be or look like in 2047? Okay, we will be a much older country. Our median age is 29. Our median age then will be 39. It looks very old relative to today, but it will be still much younger than the rest of the world. The median age of China today is 39, and they're worried about becoming old, etc. The median age of the United States is 37. By that time, the median age of China will cross 50. Countries like Japan and all will become somewhere close to 60. Italy will probably be beyond that. India will be among the youngest countries in the world. 2, India will be a well-to-do country. It will be a developed country. The size of the Indian economy, which Niti Aayog at least is targeting through our models, etc., and a vision document which I have prepared for the Prime Minister, which is going to be released at some point in the near future, is going to be a country with an economy which is about $30 trillion in size. What would that mean? The size of the United States economy today is $25 trillion. I'm not saying they will be still at 25. They'll be probably much larger than us. But 30 trillion in 2047 is an India we cannot imagine today. You'll have to go to Hollywood and ask them to make a movie India at 2047. They will have a tough time trying to figure out how India will look like. Even AI can't actually tell you what India will look like. Per capita incomes will be in the range of $18,000 to $20,000. That's what a developed nation is going to be. What would it mean? Individuals will behave differently. Consumption patterns are going to be different. Lifestyles are going to be different. Commuting and movement patterns are going to be different. You already can see that every day. The last 20 years has seen this boom in civil aviation. How would it be in 2047? Maybe there will be no aircraft. You will have some other stuff, Hyperloop, this, that. Maybe SpaceX will take you faster from Delhi to Mumbai in 3 minutes. We don't know. But 2047 India is something very, very difficult to conceive. And the last thing is, the India in 2047 is going to be an India which is going to be a big, dominant global player, which we already are. But there, we will carry a much more heft and clout globally at that point in time. India already matters. India will matter much more in global affairs. So this is the India of 2047. The question then arises, how do you reach there? 2030, which is what I've been asked to speak on, is kind of a halting point on the way. You're on a long journey, there are many stations on the way, so 2030 will be a station 35, 40, and then you reach 47. But the point I'd like to say is this a dream? Is this a fantasy? Okay, is that better? Yeah. So is this a dream? Is this a fantasy? Certainly not. I'll say today is actually India's moment. And that's some point we must remember. Today is India's moment. Why is it so? And it's good to look back and see. This is a country which was poor. People were writing India off at the time of independence. We thought the country will not have a future. Where are we now? 75 years down the road. And the most important thing is, an entire 3 generations of people, bureaucrats, people in the private sector, public sector, everywhere, have spent their lives addressing problems of scarcity, subsistence, disasters, relief. That's what life has been. Bureaucrat like me, my entire skill profile is to handle those kind of issues. You know, the next drought, the next flood, the next famine. How do I ensure people go to bed without a hungry stomach? This is what everybody's been trained at. The country didn't have basic services to most people, you know, electricity, water supply, drinking water. These were not things which were expected as a norm. The good thing is, a lot has been done. In the last 10 years, I've seen such an acceleration in provision of basic services. So what I would normally say, and I've said that in other places also, that the problems of the past century have roughly been resolved or are on the verge of being resolved. I can say by mid-25, this is a country which will have universities. The problem of basic services is done with. Everybody will have household electricity, household water supply. They will have a reasonable shelter. There is going to be road connectivity. There's already telecom connectivity. There's going to be a broadband. There is going to be a whole lot of basic issues. Everybody has health coverage of some form or the other, particularly the poorest. 50 crore Indians have health coverage and now been expanded to people over 70 years. So a lot of issues which were the primary issues which were bugging the nation, the policymakers and the government, which was also constrained for resources, are largely done. Which means India is at an inflection point. It's at a cusp in its growth trajectory, which if we grab, is what will take us to that, you know, vision which I painted of an India in 2047. How do you do it? I mean, before we go how to do it, this is not, first of all, an easy affair. India is trying to grow. It has to grow rapidly, and it can grow rapidly, and I'll tell you what are the challenges it has to address. But before we talk about that, why should we feel bullish about it? One of the reasons we need to feel bullish about it is, A, our demography. It's in our favor. India and Africa are going to be the largest suppliers of a youthful workforce for the next 30, 40 years in the world. It's inescapable. And we will be the workforce not only in India, but around the world also. Nurses, doctors, lawyers, chartered accountants, it's not the IT tech support alone. People need hands. And as service sector dominates the world, service sector is inextricably linked with people. And there is going to be a shortage of people as the world ages. So India is going to have a very, very big sweet spot there. The second big thing which is in favor of India, geopolitics seems to be in our favor. The rise of India is one of the most benign rises in the world. We are not somebody who is out there to disturb global harmony. So people actually welcome the rise of India, unlike the rise of many other nations, which has been a problem. What happened at the turn of the last century? You know, the rise of Germany took 45 to 50 years for the world to adjust to 80 years and 2 world wars, right? Because the incumbent powers found it difficult to accommodate them. The rise of India is a non-threatening rise. I mean, as we say, India is projected as a Vishwamitra or a Vishwabandhu. We are a friend of the world. So I think as a role model, the rise of India is actually welcomed, and geopolitics, the way it's shaping up, particularly in our neighborhood and in Asia, India is actually a favorable place. So that's another thing. The other couple of favorable things going in our favor. I think A, technological disruption. I mean, I'm sure in the next 2 days you'll be talking about artificial intelligence, how it affects, businesses, how it affects, government, corporates, all that. But I think AI, all disruptions disadvantage incumbents. I think that's the thing to be noticed. So, when the IC engine was invented, 100 odd years ago, it disrupted the mode of transport. You had the steam engine invented 150 years ago. It disrupted, the stagecoach and the horse carriages. AI is a disruptive technology. And then what happens is we are on the same level playing field as everybody else. If we use it well, we can actually leapfrog. There is also this problem. You say a problem, you say an opportunity. You see, challenges and problems and opportunities are two sides of the same coin. Right? It's like a glass being half full or half empty. So the world may think climate change is a challenge. I actually see climate change as an opportunity. The rest of the world has to retool, re-engineer their existing systems to actually become climate friendly or green. 90% of India of 2047 is not yet built. We have what, 3.5 trillion going to 30 trillion. 90% of the India then is still not there. Okay. And so the 90% is not retooling. You just have to build it right. So it actually is also in your favor. You can actually become a leader in climate technologies, in green technologies, and climate R&D. So a lot of favorable factors are there in your favor. And there are also challenges. Challenges was, I mean, one of the biggest and most rapid rises in the recent past has been our neighbor, China. And prior to that, you had the, the Far East, the tigers, Taiwan, South Korea, etc. They grew up in a very benign global political environment and a benign economic and trade environment. The global environment is not benign anymore, either politically. You can see all kinds of disruptions in Europe, in the Middle East. It's not going to be an easy future. And two, trade is not going to be as friendly as it was in the past. So, the openness somehow seems to be retreating in many parts of the world. We have to see our future in these difficult circumstances. However, it's balanced by the opportunities in our favor. Having said that, how do we get there? And getting there, let's now focus on 2030. We should easily double our economy by 2030. I mean, we're about $3.5 trillion now. Actually, we will be becoming about the third largest economy by 26 or 27. We will overtake Japan and Germany. There's no doubt about it, and we've seen our internal models. By the way, the $30 trillion case which I'm mentioning is the base case. It's not the optimistic case. So if you do things better, you actually can be bigger, even better. Having said that, the first thing that you need, if you want to go somewhere, and all of you work closely with corporates, you need to have a grand strategy. If you don't have a grand strategy, you won't reach your goal, because you don't have a goal to begin with. And I think that's something we need to understand. Governments are also organizations and entities. You won't reach your goal by accident. You have to define a goal, you have to lay down the path to it, and have a strategy to reach that. I think that's important. And the good thing is the government has a goal, a vision, and a strategy. And that's what we worked on in NITI with the government, with other departments, with stakeholders. It's been very widespread, a year and a half, two, and I think that's there. There is a grand strategy, and I think that's the big, big plus point. And never in the history of India has such a grand strategy been laid, that this is where we want to be. I mean, the man on the moon was a mission for Kennedy, and that was a vision and a clear goal. And once you have that, you achieved it. And the context in which he gave that goal. Similarly, we have a context. We have put the problems of the past behind us. We need to discover the challenges of the future. And recently, the World Bank came up with this World Development Report where they talked about the middle income trap. That's the danger which is in front of us. Do nothing, no strategy, and you fall into a middle income trap. And something I've been talking about now for a year or so. The biggest threat to India is a middle income trap. World Bank has done studies. It's been shown, somewhere in the 1960s, there were 100-odd countries which are middle income. Around 13 of them have broken out from middle income to high income. Think of all the countries of Southeast Asia. They are stuck in the middle income. Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, they are just not breaking into the higher income. On the superficial level, they all look nice. Good roads, good infrastructure, etc. But you need to break out into that. And I think that's what our strategy is taking into account. What is the strategy about? I'll break it into 3 or 4 pieces. There's a strategy about the economy. The strategy of the economy, agriculture. A data point which most people don't realize is that India has the largest agriculture area in the world. It's more than that of the United States. The United States is 3 times the size of India in geography. We have more cultivated land in India than the US. You actually can be the food basket of the world. But that will require a complete reorienting of agriculture. You have to be much more productive, you have to diversify, you need new crops, you need food chains, you need supply chains, you need, the entire value chain needs to be, ensured that it's of high quality, world class. You can feed half the world. I think there is a goal, there's a direction in which one is actually working. Go on to industry. I think industry has done very well. When I say Indian, I mean everybody operating in India. I'm not talking of Indian owned alone. I think it's had a glorious record. But there is one black mark. Indian industry doesn't produce for the world. And we have hobbled it ourselves. I think India has to be far more open to freer trade. It needs to cut tariffs massively. I'm a proponent of that. I think there will be damage. There will be losses all around if there are tariffs which are reduced, but it doesn't matter. The gains will far exceed the losses. There will be new people who emerge who will actually take advantage of this. And that's the way to integrate it in India. It's sometimes a very sorry state of affairs. Bulk of what India exports is not what the world wants. That's a very important point. 80% of India's exports account only for 30% of world trade. 70% of world trade is in goods which you don't export. So you actually don't sell stuff which are actually traded most of the world, tea, coffee, the traditional stuff, or even our manufactured stuff. They're not the big ticket stuff, The big ticket stuff is electronics, automobiles, automobile components, chemicals. We are minor players. Our global share is 1 to 2%. And in a way, we are to blame because of our past policies for not having become part of global value chains. Bulk of global trade happens within value chains, within companies, or within a few companies. You need to break into that. And I think Niti is working on that. We released a report on electronics and electronic components. We're working with others. So many of you have interacted with us. I saw Virat somewhere when I entered. He's there in the room. We worked with electronics to prepare. We're working on automobiles, auto components, chemicals. We'll look at textiles, leather. I mean, our performance in leather and textiles is actually something not to be very proud of. Look where Bangladesh and Vietnam were a couple of years ago. And where are they now? 3 to 4 times our exports. So I think we need very targeted. And the targeted strategy is simple, just cut tariffs, make life simpler, do ease of business, cut down forms, form filling, see that credit and other things are much easier, it will take off. And trust the private entrepreneur, they'll do it. The third area, so that's on manufacturing. My only thing about manufacturing is don't get intoxicated by the size of the local market. I think that's the biggest threat I see in future. Countries of our size get intoxicated by the size of the domestic market. And I'm deliberately using the word intoxicated. It gives you a high. But mind you, that high can be dangerous. You remember the Chinese emperor who sent a fleet of 1,000 ships around the world, and they came back and said that there's nothing for China to learn from the rest of the world, and burnt the fleet. And that was the end of China. Like 400 years, China became more and more backward. I think that's something we should avoid. We are there. We should integrate with the world. And that's where our future is. You buy and sell both ways. I mean, it can't be a one-way traffic. The third area is actually services. Problem in India is services is actually mistaken for IT, and now it's got expanded to Global Capability Center. It's much, much more than that. Given that services are the largest part of economy, the fastest part of global trade that's happening, services require a different approach. I mean, first of all, we don't even have a ministry which looks at services or any agency which looks at services. I mean, the WTO classification, they have about 16 categories of services and about 120 subcategories. We didn't even look at them as tradable commodities. The fastest growing services segment in India is not IT, it's actually professional services, which is lawyers, consulting, and the whole range of work, chartered accountants, etc. So I think we need to start looking at India becoming a global provider of education services, health services, professional services, a whole host of things. And I think that's a large area which will require, because we have never looked at it. What has healthcare in India been about? Healthcare in India is about treating your own people, treating malaria, tuberculosis, and so on and so forth. But you also run the best hospitals in the world. And your healthcare costs are a fraction of what's there in the rest of the world. You can be a service provider. Same with education. I'm not saying stop Indian children from going out to study. There are large parts of the world where people want to come to India to study. Make things easier. I mean, and there are all kinds of small things which can make a lot of difference. If you're a deemed university, and all private universities are deemed university, they have to write deemed university in their name. Somebody abroad, when he looks at that, they'll keep wondering, what is deemed? Are you a regular or an irregular or a backdoor entry? I mean, this is a regulation which just needs to be scrapped. Just call yourself a university. Whatever be the route through which you become, you are a university, your degrees are on par with the rest. So it's these kind of things which actually hobble people. So I think if you open up, I mean, you've got private universities in India, you've got Manipal, VIT, SRM, Symbiosis. They can be world leaders in education, and we'll have large education hubs. And many parts of India can be big health hubs, education hubs, and we can go on to many other sectors and services. I think, and that is there. The fourth area, which has often been ignored and which is something which Niti has been looking at, is cities. Cities in India grow by accident, like many other things. And otherwise, we abandon cities to master planners, architects. Cities are not about master planning. Cities were created by people as a part of their economic endeavors. From nomads, you become agriculturists, and then you needed a place to trade, and that's you got how urban centers grew. Fundamentally, every city is an economic hub. And bulk of the GDP of India of 30 trillion, 25 trillion is going to come from cities. So we need to actually plan for cities to be growth hubs, to drive growth. Otherwise, you'll have master plans without realizing that there are economic activities that happen on a massive scale. You go across Yamuna, and you know, what's that, Gandhinagar or whatever is there, it's got some 30,000 small factories, which is a huge garment manufacturing hub, one of the largest in India. You go to Bombay and you'll see Dharavi is actually a $1 billion economic hub. It's not a slum alone. The point is because you never planned for it, but economic activities is what drives cities, you need to plan for it. So we have started a program of actually preparing economic plan. We have just released one last Thursday in Mumbai to make Mumbai take it from the Mumbai region, about 5 districts, MMR as they call it, is about $150 billion today, take it to $300 billion by 2030 and take it to $1.5 trillion by 2047. That's the size of New York or Tokyo. But if you don't plan for it, you don't. London, New York, Tokyo, Seoul, Shanghai, Dubai, all of them have economic visions. And the rest of the infrastructure in the city is built around that vision. Infrastructure is not built because you have a traffic jam on a roadside, build a flyover. Sorry, maybe a traffic jam is a good thing. It's good to slow down traffic at points. No, it's a fact. There are places where you need to build good infrastructure because it serves an economic purpose. So if you don't have that, then this is what will happen. You know, you'll land up in urban messes. So I think that's something. I mean, the width of that road which goes to Gurgaon, I don't think many parts of the world have roads that wide, and still traffic doesn't move. So you realize that's a problem. The economy is overtaking and superimposing itself on infrastructure or urban planning, which never accommodated it. So I think cities are an important area we need to work on. Just a couple of areas we also need to look at is the green economy. That's an important part. As I said, it's going to be a point where India can be a global leader. We'll be working on it. NITI's actually got one of the strongest groups in the country now, which we have created last year, which is working on that. From October onwards, you'll see a lot of stuff coming out. A pathway to the net zero by 2070, a green transition, a couple of industries, steel, cement, chemicals, aluminium. These are the ones which need to do. Circularity, how do you get circular economy going in many areas? And we're working with governments. And the biggest thing is working with states. And I think that's the strength of NITI. We can work with states. And then, of course, there's going to be infrastructure, there's going to be resources. So all these areas have been looked at. All these areas will require a lot of change. And I think the private sector will have a last but not the least, underlying all this, and I think that's most important, that's why I've actually brought it to the end. Be it services, be it manufacturing, be it agricultural transformation, I think we need to invest in the individual. And the individual is key. End of the day, what is all this for? It's for you and me, right? It's for the people of India. You know, the Constitution begins, we, the people of India, right? So we need to invest in individuals. We need to invest in their education. We need to invest in their skilling. We need to invest in their healthcare. And that is what will actually make a lot of this happen. Some investment is there, some of it is misaligned, some of it is not happening, but I think a lot of attention has to be paid to that. I mean, if you have to become a service provider to the world, what's the quality of the people you need to have who will have the skills to be a provider for the world? You know, you need to work towards that. And I think that is there. The other challenge we need to also look at is the regional balance within the country. There are some parts which are actually doing better in addressing a lot of this. Some parts are trying to catch up. If we don't do that, we will have a lot of internal migration, etc. I think that's also to be addressed, and I think that's being done. And last but not the least, he leveraged science and technology big time to actually undertake this transformation and this growth of doubling the economy and making it 10 times. And I think you've seen some steps. A couple of days ago, the Anusandhan National Research Foundation had its first meeting. The government is putting a 1 lakh crores into that. That's for public sector R&D to a large extent. That takes technology from people who are familiar with that, from a TRL level of about, say, 1 to 6. But there's a second fund of a similar size, 1 lakh crores, which is going to be announced soon. It's been announced in the budget, not yet put on the ground, which will take things from a TRL 7 to 10, which is actually productized research, and actually throw it into the market, which is largely targeted at the private sector. So I think India is going to, and there are going to be a lot of moonshot projects. We have a national quantum mission, we have an AI mission, a lot of, you have seen that in space, we have missions going on. We may be launching on, there's a plan to make an Indian civilian aircraft. Civil aircraft is a very notional thing. It's not the aircraft that is important. If you master manufacturing an aircraft, you have mastered one of the most complex pieces of engineering, which actually puts you in that point. We are breaking into the high income level, because that means your society, your industry, and your systems have the capability to handle complexity. Lastly, what is the role of the private sector? I think the entire plan of the government, the strategy of the government hinges upon two, three things. Private sector to lead everywhere. We have a Prime Minister has said many times, maximum governance, minimum government. Minimize the role of the government in corporate lives, individuals' lives to the extent possible. Release the creative juices that flow in the economy, in the private sector, to the best of their abilities. Create an enabling environment. Second part is, there was also a question which I'm not addressing, but it's about credit markets, etc. It's too detailed. But the thing is, the requirements of India are so huge as we go into the future. I mean, not even going into the numbers, but if I put the numbers on the ground, people will tremble. The numbers are so large in terms of requirements. Rapid growth requires, it's going to be a huge sump which can absorb money, investment of a very, very high level, which means we need to be open to domestic investment, international investment. We need to make life easier. We should make India a very attractive destination, which a lot of attempts are being made. Most of our areas are actually open. But we need to remove a lot of pain points, so that far more. NITI is also trying to do that. All parts of government are trying to do that. And not just portfolio investment, but also direct investment. I think this is a place where companies around the world should be welcome to seek their future. And I think that's what will make India a global giant. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for this very comprehensive presentation. I think you covered all the opportunities and the challenges. We agree with you completely, including the need for the road from Gurgaon to Delhi to widen, as people who live in Gurgaon. Since your presentation was so comprehensive, in fact, a lot of questions that we wanted to ask you already covered, but I would like to double-click on a couple of points. One is this, you talked about the challenges, the next phase of growth for India, that the world is a little unstable. More importantly, I think when China grew in the 90s, they grew in the era of globalization. And now it looks like we're entering into an era of deglobalization. And India itself has got the Atmanirbhar policy. And PAFI has members from both multinational and Indian companies. I would like you to double-click on this point about how we grow in this space. What do you envisage are the role of global companies in India, and how do we kind of navigate the way forward?
Thank you, Harish. I don't think there is deglobalization in a massive way that's happening. What is happening is nearshoring, friendshoring. So I think the geographies are getting more restricted. And it's not that US is shifting production from China to US. It's shifting it from China to Mexico or to other countries. You have to understand there is a fundamental imbalance in the world today. Working hands are in some places, global demand is elsewhere. So I don't think the places which have the demand can satisfy it domestically. It will still be coming through trade. So this deglobalization, I would put it, is actually reforming your supply chains. So if we actually take advantage of the reforming of supply chain, I think India is going to be there. I mean, Vietnam has done it very, very well. I mean, you look at the strategy which the country has had. It is a noodle junction of free trade agreements. There's no part of the world with which Vietnam does not have a free trade agreement. And they've sold that successfully to get firms to move out of China to Vietnam. And I think there is a method there. So we also need to crack that. So it's not going to be unfavorable. The second part of the story is being the largest source of, we are also, the other thing is compared to Vietnam and Bangladesh, India is not an economy which is driven by one or two products. We are a broad-ranging economy. I mean, take textiles. We are one of the few countries which is there from cotton at one end till the garment at the other end. People have parts of the value chain in their countries. Egypt makes fiber, but they don't make garments. You go to Bangladesh, they make garments, they don't make fabric. India is there on the entire value chain. So it's actually a very broad-based economy. That also actually creates problems for our tariff policies, and that's why I drive for tariffs. In India, if you play around with tariffs, you touch one area, you create trouble for another area, because the entire value chain exists in India. So I think that's one of the reasons. The second part you talk about, Atmanirbharta, actually I will define as self-confidence. That you engage with the world in a very self-confident manner. And Atmanartha basically means that, you will actually sell and buy on your terms. So I think that's the way to look at it. The opportunities are huge. If you see the shifts that are happening in global trade, there is a remarkable shifts that are happening. We have seen projections till 2030, 40, etc. Oh, I can see huge opportunities. We have an export basket last year about 400 odd billion, 50 billion. You easily go to $1 trillion in a couple of years' time. I mean, if you include goods and services, we are already at about 750 billion. That's one. Looking at the multinationals and corporates, as I said, this is a country which is welcoming to all of them. And a lot of them have had immense successes in India. But very often they have come to manufacture for India, the domestic market. I think the way we should attract multinationals is to make India a base, not only for India, but for a large part of the world. And I think a couple of days ago, I was reading about Ford trying to reopen its factory in Chennai. To what? Not just to sell in India, but actually as a factory to supply to large parts of Africa, etc. Engineering and solutions which are designed for India have applicability in probably 3/4 of the world, in Latin America, in Africa, Central Asia, Far East. So I think India is actually a solutions lab which we should harness and grow.
Right. In the interest of time, I will not ask the second question. I'm going to ask some of my colleagues to ask. I agree with you completely, sir, that we should not be intoxicated by the domestic market. Make in India for India is interesting, but make in India for the world is exciting. With that, Chetan, would you like to ask the next question?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that very compelling, multi-hued sort of vision that you drew for us. You very, kind of briefly, fleetingly touched upon the role of states. Can you elaborate a little more on, what Niti Aayog, in fact, is doing to really win them over? Because aligning them to your objectives, I think, is absolutely critical. So what would be the few things that you are doing?
Thanks, Mr. Krishnaswamy. Niti actually is very uniquely positioned in Delhi for that kind of work, because my governing council, the Prime Minister is the chairman, and all the chief ministers are the members. So we actually have a very good platform to engage with states, and one of our goals is cooperative federalism. One point about reforms in India, whatever word you use, reforms, actions, measures, I think 90% of that now has to be done at the state level. I mean, you take an industry, for example. Where is the land? It's in the state. Electricity, water supply, labor, everything is in states. There's very little actually government of India now needs to do except some issues with the external sector or taxation. And I think that's where Niti is actually can and is playing an important role. We had drawn up plans for cities, for example. Our plan for Mumbai was with the government of Maharashtra. Tomorrow I'm going to Surat. The plan for Surat, a vision is being released. There's something for Varanasi, there's something for Visakhapatnam. We not only have a national vision, Niti is currently working with more than a dozen states preparing state visions. The vision for Gujarat is out. It's been released in January, which is actually done by Niti with the state government. We are working, we should be seeing in the next 2 months the visions for Chhattisgarh, Orissa, Andhra Pradesh come out. We're working with Madhya Pradesh, Assam, Odisha, Bihar, a large Rajasthan, and working with them so that they also, goals are not only national, you need to push them down. So every chief minister, every chief secretary should have a goal for themselves. Where should we be going? And Niti doing it for all helps align visions. There are parties of multiple colors and hues everywhere, but Niti plays a very central role in seeing all these get aligned with the national vision. So this is something which we are playing a very, very useful role. And as these visions come out, you will see a very interesting, striking, very different also for each one. The strengths of, say, Odisha will be quite different from the strengths of Andhra. Both are coastal states, but with different endowments. So that is one area. The third area is we also actually engage with states individually on specific themes. So take industrialization. So we have come out with something on, say, electronics industry. We will work with a couple of states to put a lot of suggestions into practice. Large industrial parks, worker housing, better electricity supply, quality, transportation, creches for women employees. All these things, we actually will work with states to actually see they come up. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the Global Value Chain report that Niti Aayog brought was an excellent one, and I would have normally asked, how do you take it forward and working with the states, and I think we will engage with Niti. And Niti has been extremely welcoming to industry. We see when we walk into the building so many young people working there in Niti Aayog. So we very much enjoy working with Niti. Ajay, do you have a question?
Thank you, sir, on your very comprehensive blueprint, and we are looking forward to the formal blueprint, as you said, you'll be presenting, and there is a role for private sector. What is it we as public affairs professionals can do more with the government at Delhi, with Niti Aayog, and at the states?
Okay. I think you should speak up more. Where you speak is a different matter, but I think you should be a faithful communicator of issues to government. I think that's very important. I mean, take Niti, for example. And Niti is a very neutral platform. Just as it's a neutral platform between the center and the states, it's a neutral platform between the government and people outside government. We have a unique position, which is, so I think individual firms, organizations like PAFI, others also, they should be forthcoming, come up clearly with problems, what do they face. For example, we had this angel tax stuff which came up. I mean, before that, sometimes in February, March, we had long sessions with the Indian Venture Capital Association, listed out a lot of issues. We then concretized them. Being part government, we also know what's doable and what's not doable. You can have a wish list which is full of dreams, but we need to concretize what is doable, sift it through, pass it on. We have an internal lobbying role within government where things are doable. So I think that's where, the organizations like PAFI or anybody else or industry chambers or individual firms can do a fabulous role. Whoever I meet, I keep asking, send me a one-pager, keep it non-attributable if you don't want to let your name be known. You don't want to antagonize people because you said some bad things. Doesn't matter. It's for us to cover that. But the point is that feedback is very, very... If you don't complete the feedback loop, how do you know what's going right and what's going wrong? And I think that's the core of any conversation. And as long as we do that, both here as well as states, it's very important. Some state may be, dreaming. Something you got Karnataka here, they may decide we'll become an agriculture powerhouse. Then we'll have to say, look, where do you have the manpower? Do you have people, or is everybody becoming urban? We need to have conversations, and conversations happen if it's fair, frank, and certainly, nobody's saying publicize it from the rooftops, but I think conversations within walls is very important.
This is music to our ears. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, again, for this very comprehensive presentation. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions, but unfortunately, we'll have to save it for another occasion. We have something called the PAFI Dialogue. We would like to invite you to one of the sessions where we can have more of the informal conversations where we can give feedback. So with that, I would like to invite Vishwanath to propose a note of thanks.
Thanks, Harish. Thank you very much, Mr. Subramaniam, for an extremely comprehensive coverage of all the issues. I think you set the context and the direction for the 2 days. Because I think everything that you said are the various topics that you're going to cover over the next 2 days. So thank you so much for doing that. As Ajay said, as PAFI would certainly like to engage far more with you. And as Harish said, we would like to invite you again for another session. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I think one of the biggest things which you talked about was how the private sector can start working with you far more, and that we should speak far more. I think that is something which would resonate with everybody here, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot more from all of us in terms of taking this forward. Thank you very much. Please do continue to stay here because we have the next session, which is starting soon, on an inclusive and sustainable roadmap to 2030. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.